People want to profess negativity about the human species as a whole. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the human species, aside from building some buildings, has really devoted most of its time to killing other humans. I mean, if you look at world history, that's basically what it's all about. I mean, even with the Crusades, I mean, the Crusaders went out and what did they do? They killed other Christians. Just they conquered Constantinople. Why? Because because they could. Um, yeah, I mean, human history is a bit smarmy in that way, and I don't think that that people really want. I mean, I've embraced that fact. For me, it's been crystallized, and I can see that. But I don't think it's what people want to believe because people want to believe that they're special. People want to believe that if given the choice, they'll be on the side of right, and it doesn't always happen that way. The soldiers in the Wehrmacht who were killing Jews, the people who took the most delight in torturing people, the people who were picking up infants and smashing their heads against the wall, were accountants, they were milk delivery people, they were farmers, they were lawyers, they were doctors, they were pharmacists. But when given the license, they acted in the worst nature of the human species. And I don't think people get that from the Holocaust. People, when it comes to the Holocaust, people like to say, Adolf Hitler. And that's about the end of it. It happened 70 years ago, get over it. You know, but it's really more about human nature than it is about Adolf Hitler.
And the other facet of human nature is that the people who lived through it,
Mm-hmm.
how they handled having to live the rest of their lives, raise their children.
Now, don't get me wrong, there were very good people during the war. My father was slave labor for Julius Modrich. And Julius Modrich looked after my father. His wife looked after my father on a couple of occasions. And they got because working meant living. My father got my mother through Julius Modrich, got her her work renewal to work in his factory.
Got his mother.
My father got his mother
Right.
to work renewal. He's he had my grandmother re-signed up to work. So I mean, even amongst, that's the thing, I mean, there's a reason why there is a grove of the righteous Gentiles in the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem. And by the way, we had a picture of ourselves underneath the Julius Modrich tree, because without Julius Modrich, none of us would be here. We were all standing under the leaves, under the branches of Julius Modrich. I mean, but people like him were very, very few and far between. That's how you can have a grove of the righteous Gentiles.
It's a grove and not a huge forest.
Right. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add that we might not have covered?
Well, I mean, growing up, I mean, I barely understood, my place in this whole scheme, in this world of the Shoah. So, I mean, certainly, you know, like other kids, you know, when I was growing up, certainly wouldn't have understood it. And I think that's another thing that set me apart. I mean, well, that is the thing that another thing that set me apart from kids who I was, let's say, going to PS 81 with, and that is because of the war. I had relatives in Ecuador. Still have relatives in Argentina, in Brazil, relatives in Israel. I have a cousin in Holland. You know, I have relatives out on the West Coast. You know, my family, I was basically raised with this, and my uncle was Swiss, my father was Polish. I found out I was spoken to in German. You know, I grew up with sort of an international outlook on things that other people just don't get. Especially, you know, growing up in New York City, especially in the '70s, you know, and all that. Growing up in Riverdale, this insulated little, you know, community here. It's a great community, but it's very insular. Even from the rest of the city, it's very insular. We're how many miles from Chinatown? You know, we're you know, I mean, Harlem and Washington Heights are places that you drive past on the West Side Highway, on the Henry Hudson Parkway. How many people actually get out over there? It's insular. You know, so yeah, I felt that I had a unique childhood in that I always grew up with people, you know, with, I mean, there was Yiddish and, you know, my father would speak Yiddish because, ironically, and this is another thing that my father can't understand, why my grandmother spoke German to me. When he grew up, they spoke Yiddish in the house, but she spoke pure German to me. So that's one of the things that still confuses my father to this day, why she spoke pure German to me. And actually, I think part of it may have been her going back, you know, because when my grandmother was growing up, there was no Poland. Poland came about in 1923, basically. So my grandmother was already a fully grown woman when Poland came about. So German was the language because the part of Poland that my father comes from was at one time the Kingdom of Galicia in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and my mother's brother, Uncle Max, he went to university in Breslau, and he fought in the German army during World War I, so he spoke German. And his descendants, like, you know, my cousin Juan Jose, who was born in Ecuador, he speaks German because his mother spoke German. She was raised, you know, in Germany. So, yeah, you know, it's I've always had sort of of a more internationalist perspective on things. That's one of the unique things about my growing up, you know. And, yeah.
Well, thank you so much
You're
for
very
the
welcome.
interview.